Would you like to scale your business while working less? Just picture this. Your business is thriving, scaling beyond even your wildest imagination. You're leaving an infinite positive impact on your clients' lives. And it's a Tuesday afternoon, and you're going on a bike ride. And in the middle of the day, you're going to the beach with your kids and just chilling, having fun. What would that feel like? Like, hopefully you're already living that, perhaps. But if not, just take a second and just imagine that. And the great news is this does not have to be a fantasy or a daydream. It can actually come true. And so today we're going to be talking to Evans Putnam. Did I say your last name right? Putnam? So I think Putman. I had it typed
Putman.
wrong.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. And Evans is going to be giving you the lowdown on how to make all of this happen. And I'm awesome Angie Ingstrom.
And I'm Gitte Oetker. And we are so excited to have you on a podcast today, Evans, because actually, Evans, he's a top level entrepreneur. He's even featured in Russell Brunson's high ticket programs. And today, Evans will be sharing his best tips on how you can create simple, sustainable client acquisition and cash flow in your business using podcast. So let me just share just a little bit about his very impressive bio. So Evan is the founder of Podcast Profit School, and he's the creator of the podcast ATM business model, Infinite Impact Method, and the Serpreneur Blueprint. Evan's trainings are so amazing that they are licensed by and featured in ClickFunnels founder, Russell Brunson, in his high-ticket coaching programs. Evan has 20 plus years of experience as an entrepreneur, and he's created and he's sold 3 businesses already. Now he's on a mission to help entrepreneurs just like you and me build purpose-driven, profitable businesses while creating more time freedom and creating an infinite positive impact to change lives. Let's go.
Yes, welcome, Evans. Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, thank you both for having me. Thank you. And you know what? I loved, thank you for going through my bio there. But the one thing you said that I absolutely love, Gita, is you said been a part of creating and selling 3 businesses already. So you sort of like laid the foundation. So there's more to come. You already
Yeah,
future
I
paced
know.
me to more success. So I appreciate that 100%. So I'm seeing it. I'm visualizing it. It's coming. It's going to come true. So thank you for putting that out there.
Oh, you're welcome.
I love that. That's so awesome. All right. Well, Evans, let's jump into it. Tell us, what inspired you to get started in this business with podcasting?
Well, it's sort of a long story, so I won't go too deep, but I sort of fell into podcasting in a weird way where I had a total different business going on. I was a marketing consultant strategist, and everything was going great, top of the world. Had just quite a small core of clients, but I was making enough money at this time to bring my wife home from her job because she was like, she was managing general manager of this really nice restaurant here in Charleston, South Carolina. So we were like 2 ships passing in the night. We had a very young daughter, and she was exhausted all the time, right? I was getting off easy because she would come home 2, 3 in the morning, get up at the crack of the dawn so I could start working. So she was taking on the heavy load. I give her all the credit for that. But as soon as within a week of her coming home, I lost like the majority of my clients, lost almost all my revenue. And what happened is at that point, I beat myself up a little bit, as you know, it was understandable. I'm like, what in the world's going to happen? But I knew like the next day, I was like, I've always gotten clients. I can get more clients. That's when I stumbled into who then became my partner, Pat. And that's how I got into podcasting, because he had a podcast, but it wasn't an asset for his business. It wasn't growing. It wasn't getting leads. It wasn't getting clients. He didn't even have anything really attached to it. But when I met with him, I knew he had a vision. So together, I went home. I said, give me the weekend. I'll put together how this is going to look. So much like Geeta just future paced me, I came back, met him, and said, this is what we're going to do. So we went out to do it. And of course, I had these big dreams. He was just standing behind the mic speaking, right? So I was the one who was responsible for everything else, and it wasn't working, right? And we were struggling, and we got to the point where we were about 2 weeks away from shutting the doors on our business. And it was at that point where I sort of had this aha moment, and together we had a moment where we're like, look, we've got an audience of 75,000 monthly listeners, which through my organic strategy, we had grown. So that was a success. And I'll ask you to this, because I ask people this all the time. If you had 75,000 people outside of your storefront, don't you think you'd be successful? Right? But we weren't. We were not getting consistent sales, and we were getting like 2 to 3 email addresses on our list per week, per every other week, with 75,000 monthly listeners. So I share that with those of you, not to impress you about our number, but to impress upon you that it's not just about the traffic. And that's what they tell us all the time. It's traffic. Just get lots of traffic, get people to see your stuff. And I discovered that that's not what it was. And at that point, right before we were about to shut things down, we made a decision. We're like, we're going to focus on getting leads, stop selling, stop pushing the sales as much, build our lists, and create relationships. And here's what happened when we did that. The amazing thing, I want you all to sort of picture your business like Angie sort of led us through that earlier, to imagine what it would feel like now if you had 75,000 people outside your front door and 8 out of 10 of them walked through the door. And that's what happened to us, where we were getting 78.6% opt-in rate from this specific way of getting leads to come into our business. And once we pulled that lever, it was like a floodgate opened up. And the next 12 months, we basically went from feast or famine, chasing clients, chasing revenue, to bringing in $500,000 in sales, all because of that one strategy of focusing on, we just need to move the listeners from listeners to leads and build a real relationship and stop focusing on the sale. And we jokingly call it was our fabulous sales without selling system, right? So and people are like, what is that? I'm like, I don't know. I just made it up because it sounds good. But it's like, we quit selling and we started treating, instead of focusing on downloads, we focused on people. And it changed our business forever. And that's why I really love to share this method that we've created around listeners to leads, because it's the one thing that nobody is talking about when it comes to podcasting and using podcasts as a host or a guest to grow your business. And to me, it's the one lever. If you pull that lever, you can stop chasing. You can stop being in feast or famine. You can stop worrying about where's the next revenue coming in, where's the next client coming in, because you create consistent sales naturally through the process that we put together. But it all starts with getting the lead first and doing it in a way that's authentic and aligned and focuses on the human.
Sounds so exciting. Now I'm curious, Evans. Would you share a little bit more about your system?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Over time, it developed, it changed, but what we've come up with now, I call it the immersion conversion system, is the system that we created. There's 3 pieces to it. I mean, you guys okay if it's not like 25 steps? Would it be okay if would it be?
Thank you.
And here's what I want to make sure
great.
that we all, how many times have you heard the word easy and it sort of makes you cringe because you're like, it can't be easy, right? And it's not easy, but simple is different, right? So what we focused on was like, how do we create simple? And how many of you would like to have simple in your business, right? Simple, certainty, and lots of revenue and lots of leads is a nice thing if you're a business owner. So when it first started out, as we were sharing earlier, we had like 60 to 75,000 monthly listeners. We eventually got it to 150,000. Thank goodness we solved this problem before we hit that big of a number. But we had 75,000 monthly listeners, and from what everybody else was telling us, we should be successful, right? You grew your audience, you got this audience, but as I was sharing earlier, that wasn't the solution. So we were struggling to get leads, and that's when we made this big switch, and it's something we call the the irresistible opt-in offer, right? And the crazy thing is, you guys, everybody listening to this is a marketer. I'm just going to share something. It has nothing to do with your button color. It has nothing to do with your headline on your landing page. They'll tell you need all these different things, right? You need this crazy funnel, this perfect landing page. They'll tell you need to have a, well-crafted, you got to go hire the best copywriter to create your headline. None of that. Ours was an ugly landing page with just the podcast cover on it, a simple headline that was results driven, and like, put your email address here, right? But that was not why we got a bunch of leads. That was not why we were at 78.6% opt-in. And what I discovered was, once we implemented this irresistible opt-in method, that's how we ended up getting to that 78.6% opt-in rate. And how many of you know that generally 30 something percent is considered excellent when it comes to opt-in rates, right? And we were at 78.6% the entire time. And here, the reason why, and I share this with everybody, is that, and I'll give you your listeners a tip, is it has nothing to do with all that stuff. What it has to do with what you do in your content to create a real human connection, emotional bond, and transformation, and create desire for the next step. And once we did that, it was like the floodgates opened and people started opting in left or right? Because we were focusing on creating stories that created transformation, that helped people be who they needed to be to do the thing they wished to do. And the thing they wished to do, the next step was on the other side of the opt-in form, right? So that was the first part. And we were loving it because we did have that number. But I'll ask you guys this. So, because not every listener was joining our list, right? At the time, it was nice to get 78.6%, but let's say 10 people come through the door, or 10 people show up and 8 of them come through the door. That's great, right? But wouldn't it be better if your business had 1,000 people show up at the front and 800 come through the door? Don't you think your business would be a little more successful? So at that point, while we had this great number, we were like, we got to get more leads, right? How do you increase the volume? And at that point, we started trying things, and things weren't working. And we stumbled upon this new way of doing it. And we jokingly call it the no opt-in method, right? The no opt-in method. And I say that jokingly because, and realistically, because there was no opt-in form. We started using texting, right? Where people were texting to get on our list. And when they followed, but the thing that I have to share with people is like, sure, you can start implementing texting, but you got to do this the right way, right? We found there were lots of ways to do it, and you have to do it the right way, which aligns with what your listeners want, how they like to do things. You start thinking from their vantage point versus yours. And once we did that, the volume of leads went up. So now, instead of just having like 8 people come through the storefront, now we got like 800 coming through, right? And wouldn't you like to have a store full of 800 people instead of just 8? But can you guys guess what's next though, right? Like, you don't want just 800 people wandering around in your store saying, I'm just looking. Like every time, can I help you? I'm just looking, right? How many times have y'all done that? I've done it. And I think that's like my favorite thing to say when I go anywhere, when I don't want anybody to bother me, is I'm just looking. So we had to have revenue, right? You and I both know you got to have revenue to keep your business going. And this is where we stumbled upon our next discovery, because we were always innovating, always willing to try. And at this point, we had actually hired a coach, somebody who had been there before, that would allow us to like sort of fit into their frameworks, but not be beholden to the framework. We could still be ourselves within this framework. And that's what we like to do with our clients as well. But this next step that we discovered, I started thinking, I'm like, okay, and I'll ask your listeners this, and I'll ask you two this. You can probably answer this. But if I was to ask you two and everybody on here who's listening, who has a podcast or who has been on a podcast, what is one thing you can absolutely know about your podcast listeners? Like, you don't even have to be a mind reader. Like, you know, this is one thing that every single one of them, you know this about them. And that thing is that they like to listen to audio, right? So let me ask you this. Why the heck are you giving them an ebook or something instead of giving them audio? So what we did was we actually created something we call our niche cast blueprint. And a niche cast is basically a small series of audios that takes that listener from listener to lead to in a sequence, which nurtures them and keeps them in momentum. And when they're in momentum, they're moving forward, and right. And it's harder to stop something that's in momentum once it's in momentum. But guess what else happens is as they're moving forward, getting a real tangible result that you're providing them, you're building trust, you're creating more time with them. This is the immersion part, right? They're immersed in your stuff, but they're moving forward. And when they get to the end, it's like, okay, what's next? And the next logical step is whatever you have, because they've spent that much time with you. So we take them through this specific series, the immersion conversion system, where you've got that irresistible opt-in offer, you've got the no opt-in method, then we've got this new unique way of delivering the lead experience versus a lead magnet, and it's consumed versus just going on your hard drive and disappearing into the cobwebs, right? So it became so much more powerful because it built a real relationship with our listeners. And it's a super, super powerful way of moving people from bystander to audience member and then to lead.
That's
So
fantastic.
important. Yeah, I really love it. How about you, Angie?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'll expand on that at the very end.
Okay, cool.
Because right now I want Evans to share with us a little bit about what holds people back from working with you and through your process.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is like, how many times have your listeners may have heard this before? And I've heard some of the biggest names say it is podcasts are not good for getting leads. Podcasts are not good for getting sales, right? For building a business model. And what I have to say with people is that, yes, I'm sure you've tried this many times before, because I have so many successful entrepreneurs come to me who have really thriving businesses and they can't get their podcast to work, but they love doing it because they want to share their message and their mission, but it's not giving them an ROI. And they're smart enough to know where they're like, Evans, if I don't do something soon, this is a liability. It's not an asset. I'm going to have to cut it off because it's taking too much of my time. And you and I know time is super powerful and it's valuable. So what I often share with them is I'm like, you know what, let's take a look here, do this, this, and this. And usually things get fixed almost overnight. And it's almost as if people you can't see what you don't know, what you haven't been exposed to yet. And maybe you've tried almost fitting every other strategy and every other thing into making your podcast work, but it's like fitting a round peg into a square, well, not a square hole, like a square peg into a round hole, right? But and I think that's it. It's like, so we tend to blame ourselves when it's not really you, because you're really good at what you do and you're probably really super smart, right? And you know how to run a business and you're probably successful in many different ways, but it's not you. It's generally just the way that you're using your podcast. And it's really simple from my vantage point. I think just because I've worked with so many people and I can see how you can do it. And we actually just tell people, it's like, you just need an audio sales funnel, right? That's what you need. And people are like, oh, I didn't even know that existed. I'm like, I know. Isn't that cool? It's sort of a really cool new method that we created. You know, we call it the podcast ATM model, but it's really just an audio sales funnel. And when you say it that way, they start to realize, oh, it's just that I haven't tried this yet. I've tried all these other things, but I haven't tried the thing that's been proven to work over and over again. So usually that makes people feel great when they finally say, let's try it then. And then it works. And they're like, yes, this is awesome. So that's generally the number one thing. I think it's not, has nothing to do with as you as the entrepreneur. It's just that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And
Mm.
if you've been trying to drive, like I always laugh, I'm like, if you're trying to make it up a mountain, like to see the sunset just in time before, you know, it gets too late, and you're trying to drive up this dirt road and go over all these like boulders and rocks and things. You're doing it in the family truckster from Chevy Chase's Vacation, that old station wagon. It's just not going to work. You got to have a Jeep 4-wheel
Yeah.
drive. And then if you take that vehicle, you're going to get there. So that's what I share with people. I'm like, you take our vehicle, it's going to help turn your podcast into an asset for your business.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're actually rethinking the concept of using podcasts to create leads. I love that. Amazing. Are there any other things that are holding people back?
Generally, it's, yeah, you know, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. Generally, I would say, yeah, there's the time factor where a lot of people come to me like, Evans, I just don't have time for another thing. And I'm like, well, you're doing your podcast now, aren't you? No, yeah, well, I just don't have time to like create all these complicated funnels and like more landing pages and all these. I'm like, you don't have to have that, right? It's really that simple where you turn the podcast into the funnel. So you don't have to you don't have to spend a lot of time creating new assets, new tools, adding new team members to your business. You don't need any of that. You have the asset in front of you. You generally just need to do a little polishing, a little fine tuning, and a few tweaks here or there. And the other thing that's really cool is that one of the things that people struggle with is like, I got to create this like really crazy nurture sequence and all this stuff, you know, on the back end of my leads, because we need to do that. And I'm like, well, what if what we create for you, this niche cast, this audio funnel, just did that for you? And what if you were able to get people to go from listener to lead, to raising their hand, reaching out to you, asking you, how can I work with you, in under 30 days or less? So not only do you not have to put in a bunch of time creating a bunch of different headaches and different integrations and different things, new funnels, new tech, new team members, but you actually get back time. So it's like we're creating time for you with an automated system that moves people from listener to lead to client. And you just get to sort of sit back and like let the right people come to you. And I'd ask you all, I know you two would nod yes to this, but your listeners too, like, would you not rather have people come to you and want to buy your stuff versus you having to chase, convince, and convert and close all the time? The energy is so much better, and you end up with the right people. And the way that we develop it too with you is it saves you so much time and headaches, because the people that end up over here wanting to work with you, they're generally already set up for success. They already have their beliefs shifted to where they know that they can be successful with what you have to offer. So they're going to be successful. And we all want our clients to succeed. And once they
Definitely.
succeed, here's where the great stuff starts happening, because they start referring people to you. So now all of a sudden, you're just sitting over here going, this is awesome. Now I'm getting clients left and right, and my profit margins are going up because you're not having to go out and do all these other things. You have this one simple engine that drives your vehicle for you, that drives your business. And that's why, and I'll wrap this up here, is that when we call it the podcast ATM model, which you all talked about before, it's not something that I made up. It's not a fancy marketing one. You know, we all love to make up marketing terms and things like that, right? But it reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen, if you watched a lot of Seinfeld, my daughter would tell you, she's like, yeah, gosh, everything you do has to do with Seinfeld. I'm like, I know, I was addicted to it back in the day. But there's an episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza wants a nickname so bad, right? But Jerry's like, you can't give yourself a nickname. Right? You can't give yourself a nickname because then it's just not cool. So he's trying to drop hints and do things to get this nickname, right? Well, the podcast ATM model was not something that I just made up and gave it a nickname, right? This was actually from my client, Pat, where he just, and I've got this on tape where he did a testimonial and he's like, Evans, it's like you created this system where I just stand behind a microphone, share what I love, share my mission and my message, get my voice out to people. And in the background, there's this system, and it's like a podcast ATM. It's like you've turned my podcast into an ATM that deposits high ticket clients into my business, and I get to withdraw high profit payouts on the back end. And I was like, I love it. And it's like, let's milk it for what we got. Cause people probably aren't even going to know what an ATM is in about 5 years. So we got to push hard now with the podcast ATM. But yeah, so it was, when I look back at it, I'm like, that's what it is, right? It's a business model. And the beautiful thing is that when we installed this into Pat and I became a partner in his business, that we weren't just patching together strategies. This is an actual model that you can install into your business to create consistency that works. It's not a hack, not a shortcut. And as I left to go teach other people all about what we had created together, he was able to take this business, this podcast, which was failing, it wasn't growing, had no revenue coming in, had no business attached to it, taking that and putting it out there into the market, into a multiple bid situation, and it was purchased as a business, right? So we created an entire business from scratch following these simple 3 steps is the big lever that created that. And you can still find that podcast is out there right now. Still, it's called Real Estate Rock Stars, but it no longer has Pat's name on it, but it's still out there. But because it was created just like you would create a real business, and that's the power of it. I like to tell people, I'm like, if you're ready to have a business model versus just a podcast, right? To have something that sells one to many versus just one to one, or something that actually brings you revenue and leads on a consistent basis versus just, branding or amplifying your message, which there's nothing wrong with that too. But if you really love the podcast, you don't have to do anything else. You can just use that as your sole driver of your business, because that's what we did. We didn't do anything, no advertising, no webinars, none of that. It was all through this one simple podcast ATM model. And it all started focusing on listeners to leads.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you,
Yeah.
Evan, so much for being here today. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is fantastic. So let me ask you, what should our listeners do next?
Yeah. And thank you for asking. And one thing that we have created is that I created a video training that takes people deeper into this listeners to leads. And I would love for them to go check it out. They can have it for free. You don't have to, no hoops to jump through, anything like that. But it's, if you go to listenerstoleadslive.com/video, listenerstoleadslive.com/video, you can actually just go watch the video and learn more about what I just shared with you, take it a little deeper, take it to the next level, and start being able to implement it in your own business right away. And if you're on there and you're looking for more help, there's a way that you can contact us and see if we can help, or at least guide you in the right direction.
Thank you so much for sharing this with our listeners. Thank you, Evans. Now I'm just going to repeat this name if you didn't get it the first time. It's listenerstoleadslive.com/video. Please watch it. I'm sure it's going to be packed with value.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Evans.
Thank y'all both. This has been fun. It's been great to catch up with you again. And as you all know, I'm going to throw this back to you real quick, because I know one thing that's super powerful about podcasts is if you connect them to virtual events, it's an amazing way to grow your audience, to build that trust, and then to have an event that'll be super successful. So you guys that's your jam. So take these two strategies together. You got that freedom lifestyle that you were talking about at the beginning.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting
So
how we do with virtual events what you're doing with podcasts. That's
Mm.
what it seems like to me. It kinda, it's the same kind of, we're in the same vein. We're just
Yeah,
in virtual event.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah, and
awesome.
part of what I jokingly say when it comes to ATM is that the M stands for multiplication. It's all about multiplying your wealth, multiplying your freedom, multiplying your time. And part of that is by, not booking thousands of calls, but instead creating those virtual events where you can break through those ceilings and do that. So this is the perfect marriage of those two systems together. They work perfectly.
yeah, I totally agree. They sort of complement each other so very, very well. So yeah,
It's
so
awesome.
amazing.
Absolutely.
This is great.
All right. You want to end it for us, Geety?
Yeah, I'm just gonna thank you, Evans. It's been such a pleasure, and yeah, I've got lots of value today, and I'm looking forward to looking at that video. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you both for having me. I'm totally grateful for the opportunity to serve your audience, and yeah, any way I can help, reach out anytime, both of y'all and your audience, and let's grow together. That's what it's all about.
yeah, it's so
so
funny
true.
because at my ending, I normally end with our free report. So Geety and I will be watching that video series to get all the great tips and get our ATM machine up and running because we don't have that yet. So thank you, Evans.
Great. You're welcome. You're welcome very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
We are, go ahead and end it, Geety.
Kitty,
And I'm Angie. And thanks for listening, and keep your momentum, keep moving forward. And if you want to learn more about Elite Virtual Stages with Geety and I, you can find us on Facebook or on the web at elitevirtualstages/report. That's the link for today. We will eventually turn that into an audio because how brilliant is that? So thanks, Evan. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Excellent.